That morning, Sarah Colvert was just hanging laundry in the yard of the Calhoun estate and had no idea that the woman she worked for had just thrown away the thing that would make her known across 3 counties within a year. She found out by accident. The trash can sat by the garden gate, lid open while someone hauled out bags from cleaning. The corner of an old notebook stuck out from under a plastic liner. Linen cover, faded, something handwritten on the spine. Sarah stopped. Then she bent down and pulled it out. Inside, written in fading ink, were recipes. Apple pies, jam, apple cider vinegar. 40 years of notes, corrections, and margin remarks. On the inside cover, in the handwriting of old Dorothy Calhoun, the Calhoun apple orchard, variety, Halling, grows nowhere else. Sarah looked at the notebook. She looked at the trash can. She put the notebook in her apron pocket. 11 months later, her stand at the Beresford Farmers Market had a line. The county paper wrote about her. And Vivian Calhoun, who had thrown that notebook away, found out she had personally destroyed her own chance at a deal with the restaurant group she'd spent a year trying to impress. But that May morning, Sarah just pushed the notebook deeper into her pocket and went back to hanging laundry. Beresford, Tennessee, a small town in the Cumberland foothills, 40 minutes east of Nashville on Highway 79, if you don't get caught behind a school bus. Population around 2,000, give or take those who left and came back, and those who arrived and stayed. The farmers' market ran every Saturday from April through November. The county fair came in September, and the apple festival in October. That was the tourist season. Sarah Colvert was 23, small-framed, with dark brown hair she tucked under a bandana for work, and hands that could do far more than her job title suggested. For 2 years, she'd worked at the Calhouns, cleaning the estate, tending the grounds, occasionally helping in the kitchen when Vivienne hosted dinner parties. $12 an hour, 50 hours a week. By Beresford standards, that was decent. By Sarah's own standards, it was enough to put away $150 a month in an old tea tin. The Calhoun estate sat at the edge of town. White colonial house, 4 columns, a duck pond, 3 acres of grounds. In the old days, the Calhouns had grown apples. Not on any commercial scale, more for the table and the neighbors. The old apple trees still stood at the far end of the orchard, behind the hedge. 24 of them, some clearly older than the house itself. Sarah had passed them dozens of times and always thought the same thing. Nobody's been pruning these in years, and that's a shame. The trees themselves look strong. Vivienne Calhoun, 48, was the widow of a prosperous attorney. Her husband had died 3 years ago, leaving her the house, the accounts, and very specific ideas about how a woman of means should carry herself in Beresford. Vivian wasn't a cruel person. She was a person who simply didn't see the people who served her. Sarah, to Vivian, was something closer to a function than a person. Much like clean dishes or freshly pressed sheets, they should be there when needed, and otherwise invisible. Sarah found the notebook in late May, almost certainly when Vivian was clearing out her late mother-in-law's belongings. Dorothy Calhoun had passed that same winter, and her room was being emptied. Sarah didn't say a word to Vivian. At home, she rented a room from her aunt Clara Moss on Cherry Street, $220 a month. She opened the notebook under the lamp and read for 3 hours straight. The recipes were written for specific trees. Halling, as Dorothy called them, produced small apples, almost wild-looking, with a striped red and yellow skin and firm, slightly tart flesh that held its shape in baking. "Won't go to mush," Dorothy had written in the margin. "Won't stick together. Holds in a pie like it's still alive." The vinegar from Halling was fermented 8 months and came out dark, almost caramel. The jam didn't turn bitter the way most varieties did. Sara copied all the recipes into a separate notebook, neatly, with her own notes. Then she turned Dorothy's notebook over and stared at the inside cover. "Grows nowhere else." The following Tuesday, her day off, she went through the hedge to the apple trees. They'd been neglected, of course. Not beyond saving, but neglected. Unpruned for at least 3 years, bark cracking in a few places, the ground underneath gone weedy. But the trees were alive. Deep roots, solid trunks. Sara ran her hand along the bark and knew that these trees would outlast her if someone just gave them what they needed. She asked Vivienne about it, carefully, during a conversation about the grounds, whether it would be all right to tidy up the apple trees. Vivienne said, "Why? We don't eat apples." Sara clarified that she'd do it in her own time. Vivienne thought for a second. "If you want to, fine, as long as it doesn't interfere with your regular work." That was permission enough. Late May and all through June, Sara worked with the trees after her shifts. She wasn't an agronomist, but her mother had grown up on a farm and had explained a few things when Sara was small. The rest she got from the library. Beresford's librarian, Beatrice Lown, 62, a small woman who tended to answer questions before you'd quite finished asking them, walked her to 3 books on apple orchard management. Sara read them in the evenings, the pages filled with pencil marks that went right alongside Dorothy Calhoun's margin notes. Beatrice never asked why Sara needed to know about apple trees. "Are you looking at something specific, or learning the subject in general?" she asked once. "Specific trees." "What variety?" "It was called Halling. I can't find it anywhere." Beatrice adjusted her glasses. "That's a local variety," she said. "Dutch settlers brought it into the valley in the 18th century. Most of the orchards were cleared in the 30s. Apple companies were standardizing for canning, and Halling wasn't useful for that. Too small, too irregular. A few trees survived here and there. I read something about it. There should be an article in the County Agricultural Journal archive." Sara found the article, read it twice, then wrote in her notebook, "Rare variety, non-commercial." That's exactly why it's interesting. All summer she worked with the trees on her own time, pruning the dead wood, whitewashing the trunks, loosening the soil around the roots, adding compost she collected from the kitchen. No purchased fertilizers. She didn't have money for that. Only what was free or nearly free. On the 1st of September, she tried a Halling apple for the first time this season. From a lower branch, small, plain-looking on the outside, sweet tart inside. It was exactly what Dorothy had described. Firm, vivid, with a flavor that didn't fade. Sara stood under the tree and ate it whole. Then she picked another one. All this time, she'd been thinking. She had $4,080 in the tea tin. A stand at the farmer's market cost $250 for the season. Flour, sugar, jars for jam and vinegar. That was calculable. Renting a licensed kitchen for product certification. That was more complicated. But first, she needed apples. A lot of apples. By October, Vivienne hadn't once looked in on what was happening at the far end of the orchard. She walked by once, stopped for a second, and said, "Still fussing around back there?" Sara said, Just pruning out the dead wood. Vivian nodded and walked on. On the 1st of October, a man named Mitch Gray arrived. He came quietly, no announcements, no press releases. He rented an office in the old insurance building on Main Street and hung a sign on the door. Gray Holdings, Asset Management and Development. Beresford is a small town. News moves fast. By the end of his first week, everyone knew Gray had come from Nashville and was looking at real estate. Then it came out that he was specifically interested in apple orchards and fruit farms in the county. Then, that he was working with a restaurant group called Stone Ridge, which was opening 3 new locations in Nashville, built around the concept of local provenance. Stone Ridge was looking for suppliers of unique regional produce and products with real history. Jam, vinegar, cider. Halling was exactly that kind of history. Sara learned this from Beatrice, who always heard things before anyone else, because people talk in libraries the way they only talk there, thinking the bookshelves aren't listening. "This Gray fellow is looking for something special," Beatrice said. "He's apparently already visited 3 farms. Found anything?" "I don't know," Sara answered. "You've heard about Halling?" Sara looked at her. "Yes." "And?" "I'm working on it." Beatrice adjusted her glasses, said nothing more, just pulled another book from the shelf on food production licensing in Tennessee and set it in front of Sara. That fall, Vivian Calhoun hosted a dinner for guests from Nashville. Mitch Gray was among them. Sara helped in the kitchen, serving, clearing, staying out of the way. Gray sat next to Vivian, and she caught fragments of their conversation. Stone Ridge, local provenance, a supplier with a story. Vivian said something Sara didn't catch. Then Gray said, "What about the Calhoun orchard? I heard there used to be Holland trees there." Vivian laughed, lightly, the dinner party kind. "Those old things? They're useless, wild little nuisance fruit." Gray frowned just slightly. "That's a shame. Halling would have been something." Sara cleared the plates and heard every word. That night, at home, she opened the tea tin and counted. $4,080. Market stand, flour, jars, kitchen rental, a licensed production kitchen, the food incubator at the church rented at $70 an hour, minimum 8 hours a month. Licensing for food sales, county certification, $180, plus a health inspector visit. She wrote it all out on paper, added and subtracted, and added again. It came out tight, but it came out. The first mockery arrived in October, when she booked her market stand. The Beresford Farmers Market had run every Saturday for years, with the same families holding the same spots. The Tuckers with dairy, the Owenses with honey, Linda Page with blackberry and peach preserves. Sara went to Dan Foley, the market organizer, and said she wanted a spot. Dan looked at her over his glasses. "What are you planning to sell?" "Apple vinegar, jam, and pies." "Store-bought apples?" "No, Halling." Dan went quiet. "There hasn't been Halling in this county in 70 years, he said. "There is now, 24 trees in the Calhoun orchard." Dan studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded and took her money. The following Saturday, Linda Page asked, when Sara was setting up her stand next to hers, "Where's your apple supply coming from?" "The Calhoun orchard." Linda narrowed her eyes. "Does Vivienne know?" A beat of silence. "The trees are on her property. I've been caring for them." That's not an answer to the question. Sara said nothing. She went on arranging her jars. Linda made a small sound and turned back to her own table. Sara knew Linda would talk. In a small town, that's inevitable. She just didn't know Linda would talk to Vivian. They went to the same church. But for now, Vivian stayed quiet. It was during these weeks that Sara understood something. What she was building had to be airtight. Not just in terms of quality, but in terms of paperwork. Every receipt, every entry in her notebook, every agreement. Not bureaucracy, but protection. Her grandfather used to say, "An honest person needs documents more than a dishonest one." She understood that differently now than she had as a child. About the conversation with Vivian, the town knew by the following week. Secrets in Beresford lasted about as long as the first cup of morning coffee. Linda Page told Maggie Forrest, who worked the bank counter. Maggie told her husband. Her husband mentioned it at the barber shop. By Friday, the story was, Calhoun's housekeeper stole her recipes and is planning to sell products like they're her own. Sara found out from Clara, who came home from the market pale and said immediately, "People are saying different things." "What things?" "That you took the notebook without permission." Sara set down her cup. "It was in the trash can, Clara." "I know. I was there. I saw." Clara shook her head. "But I'm the one you told, and people are hearing what Linda says." At the next winter market Saturday, Sara set up her stand as usual. Some of her regulars acted differently. A few who used to stop by didn't. Others watched with that particular expression that means, in a small town, "I've heard something, but I don't know whether to believe it." Dan Foley came over himself. "Sara, can we talk?" "Yes." "There are rumors going around." "The notebook was in the trash can on the 28th of May, Sara said. "Clara Moss saw it. I have receipts for everything I purchased for the trees. My recipes are in my own notebook, dated. If you want to look, I'll show you." Dan watched her for a long time. "No need," he said finally. "I believe you. I just wanted to hear it from you." He went back to his business, but the chill remained. The first batch of vinegar didn't come out right. Sara followed Dorothy's notebook carefully, but the fermentation temperature in the incubator kitchen was different from the home conditions Dorothy had written for. 12 liters, the first batch, fermented too fast and came out sour to sharpness. She poured it out, noted the error, and started again. The second batch also failed. She'd lowered the temperature, but left it a week too long. The third batch was right. Dark, with a faint caramel in the smell, slightly mellower than store-bought, exactly what Dorothy had described. Sara filled a small jar, sealed it, and let it sit overnight. In the morning, she opened it and smelled it. That was the one. The pies came together on the first try. Halling really didn't go soft. The flesh held its shape. The tartness balanced the sugar without going sweet. Sara baked 4 test pies, brought some to Clara and Beatrice. Clara ate 1 slice in silence, then a second, and said, "Sell these at 25. Beatrice tasted hers, closed her eyes for a moment, and said, "Where were you a year ago when I had my birthday?" The first Saturday of November, closing day of the season, Sara set up with 3 products: apple vinegar in small bottles at $9, jam at $12, pies at $25. She sold out in 2 hours. That was the last market until April, but 7 people came up and asked where to buy through the winter. She wrote down phone numbers. Winter passed in steady work. Sara made jam and vinegar in batches, sold through word of mouth and through Clara, who turned out to be a remarkable distribution channel because she knew every person in Beresford who had ever baked a pie. By February, Sara had 28 regular customers and a waiting list for pies. That was when Dan Foley called. "I hear you're selling through winter," he said. "You should have a year-round stand." "The market's closed until April." "We have a winter format. Every 2 weeks, indoors, 15 spots, $75 a month. You didn't know?" She hadn't. She took a spot. The first winter market, second day of February, cold with light snow. She brought 3 pies, 20 jars of jam, 8 bottles of vinegar. The pies were gone in 40 minutes. Beside her stand stood Beatrice, not selling, just standing there. And whenever anyone asked about the apples, she started talking about hauling, the way people talk about something they love. Sara hadn't asked her to do it. All winter, Sara drove to Ben Oldridge's nursery twice a week to check the cuttings in the warm corner of the greenhouse, adjust the humidity, make her notes. Ben never asked why she came so often. He'd just put on tea and talk about the other varieties he was wintering. One February evening, sitting at his kitchen table, Ben asked, "Have you thought through what happens if the trees don't yield well in their first real season?" "Yes." "And?" "I've got reserves. And there's the Hicks farm 2 counties over. They run a close variety. I can make it through a transitional year." Ben nodded slowly. "What if Vivienne tries to contest the name itself? Hauling's not a registered trademark." Sara thought about it. "Then I'd call it Calhoun Hauling, because the history is the history. You can't walk away from it. But I grow the trees." Ben looked at her over his mug. "Good thinking." "The library helped," Sara said. Beatrice had done more than could be expected from the librarian of a small town. She'd found in the archives of the County Agricultural Journal from 1938 an article on hauling, with a variety description, its history of introduction to the valley, and a list of the farms where it had grown before the switch to commercial varieties. The Calhoun family was mentioned in a single line among 12 other families, not the exclusive source, not the sole custodian. "Take a copy," said Beatrice, "and I have a contact, a historian in Nashville who studies the heritage of Tennessee agriculture. If you want, I can introduce you." The historian's name was Reginald Dubois. He came to Beresford in late February, spent 2 hours in the library and 1 in Ben's nursery, looked at the cuttings, asked 10 questions, drank tea, then wrote a short piece for his Institute's blog. The Revival of Hauling, How One Housekeeper is Rescuing a Forgotten Variety. 3 agri-farming accounts with a combined following of 40,000 people shared it. By March, Sara had 73 reservation requests from private customers, small restaurants, and 2 specialty food stores in Nashville. That was when Mitch Gray came back. Not in person. He sent an assistant with a card and a note. "Mr. Gray would like to speak with you regarding the hauling supply. Are you available Thursday?" On Thursday, in the Gray Holdings office, small, 2 chairs, an umbrella stand, Sara sat across from Mitch Gray and explained what she had. Vinegar, yes. Jam, yes. Pies, yes. 24 trees she'd brought back to health, which had produced their first real harvest this past fall, and a recipe notebook with the variety's history. "We'd need an exclusive supply arrangement," Gray said. Stone Ridge is opening 2 Nashville locations in June. The menu is built around local products with provenance. Holling is exactly the right story. Vinegar and jam on the menu. Pies as dessert. Volume. Vinegar, 50 liters a month. Jam, 80 jars. Pies, 30 per week. Sara wrote it down, did the math. 24 mature trees should yield around 800 kilos in a good year, she said. That's enough for those numbers, but I'd need a larger licensed production kitchen than the incubator, and I'd need continued access to the trees. Gray nodded. We can help with kitchen equipment as part of the contract. The question of the trees is a conversation with Vivian Calhoun. And that was where it started. Sara went to Vivian on Thursday evening, explained everything. The trees, Stone Ridge, the contract offer, the notebook. Vivian listened with an expression Sara had spent 2 years learning to read. This was the face of a person who had just realized they'd missed something and now wanted it back. The notebook, Vivian said. Dorothy's notebook. Yes. You found it. Where, exactly? A pause. In the trash can at the garden gate. Vivian looked at her, didn't speak for a moment. That notebook belongs to the Calhoun family, she said at last. As do the trees. They're on my land. You tended them without any formal arrangement. Her voice had gone smooth and cold. I'm prepared to acknowledge your work at standard garden service rates, $12 an hour. The rest belongs to me. I'll give you 3% of the Stone Ridge contract for restoring the trees. That's generous, Sara. You should recognize that. Sara stood up, picked up her bag. I'll think about it, she said, and left. She didn't cry. She was angry, but the kind of anger that's cold and functional. The kind that means think, don't feel. At home, she got out her notebook and started writing. What she had, the notebook, in her hands. 3 batches of vinegar, in her hands. 28 regular customers, in her phone. 8 months of kitchen incubator receipts. Receipts for compost, tools, garden supplies, all paid from her own pocket. Records of orchard work from May through October. She'd kept them in a notebook because her grandfather always said, write down everything you do. Date, task, result. Her notebook, her hand, her numbers. And then she remembered something else. Ben Oldridge's nursery, 15 miles out on the highway, specialized in heritage varieties. Exactly the kind Holling was. Back in July, Sara had brought him cuttings from the Calhoun trees, just because Beatrice had mentioned that Ben worked with rare varieties and might be useful. Ben had taken the cuttings, tried to propagate them, and, she remembered clearly, called her in September. Sara, the graft took. I've got 8 small Holling trees. Whenever you need them, they're yours. 8 trees. Her cuttings. Her Holling. Not only the Calhouns. She called Ben that same night. Ben, those trees, are they still with you? Yes, wintering fine. I need somewhere to plant them. A pause. You need land? A lease or a purchase. A small plot, at least half an acre, something with good sun. I've got a piece behind the nursery I'm not using, just over an acre. Meant to sell it, but it keeps not happening. What would you want for a lease? $80 a month. If you plant something interesting, maybe we can work something out. Deal, Sara said. I'll come Friday. On Friday, she signed a 1-year lease with Ben Oldridge. The plot behind the nursery, $80 a month, with the right to plant. On Saturday, she went to Vivienne.
"I've thought about it," Sara said. "I'm declining your offer."
Vivienne watched her without much surprise.
"Then you lose access to the trees." "I know."
Sara set a printed page on the table.
"I want to return the notebook to you, on one condition. You officially confirm in writing that you discarded it on the 28th of May. I need that for the product's story."
Vivienne looked at the paper.
"Why would you need that?" "Because the real story of a product begins with what nearly got thrown away."
A long pause. Vivienne didn't sign. Sara took the page and left. She kept the notebook. Because she'd found it, because she'd saved it, because she'd read it and understood what it contained. The legal question was complicated. The moral one she'd already settled. Mitch Gray called Monday morning. "Sara, I understand there's a disagreement between you and the Calhouns over the trees."
"Yes."
"What happens now?"
"I have 8 hauling trees at Ben Oldridge's nursery."
"They're mine, plus cuttings I can root through spring. By next year, I'll have a small young orchard. Volumes will be lower than 24 mature trees, but for the first year, enough for a limited batch." "Stone Ridge builds their positioning around narrative," Gray said. "Small batch, rare variety, a revival. Honestly, that's better than a mature orchard. Are you available Wednesday?"
"Yes."
She didn't call Vivienne. Spring came cold. April in Tennessee can go either way, and this one ran late. Frost on the mornings, rainy days, sun only after 3. Sara planted the 8 trees on Ben's plot in the first week after the ground had warmed enough. Ben helped, not out of charity, but because hauling interested him professionally. A heritage variety, a good graft take, something to offer to collectors and preservation enthusiasts. 12 more cuttings she'd rooted through winter in the warm corner of Ben's barn. 8 took, 4 didn't. 8 more trees, 16 on the plot in total. Young trees won't fruit the first year, she knew that, but they'd give something. And she still had old fruit stored, a dry frozen reserve in Ben's cold room, 3 crates, enough for the first deliveries. She signed the Stone Ridge contract in April. Year 1, limited batch, small series designation. Vinegar, 20 liters a month. Jam, 30 jars. Pies, 10 per week. Pricing: vinegar at $14 per half liter. Jam at $19 per jar. Pies at $45. Stone Ridge's condition: exclusivity within Nashville, but not statewide. The farmers market and direct sales remained hers. Gray added, "If the supply holds, we scale up next year." Vivienne Calhoun learned about the contract about 2 weeks later, through Linda Page, who'd seen Sara coming out of Gray's office. And then Vivienne called Stone Ridge directly, their corporate office, and told them their supplier was using recipes belonging to the Calhoun family without authorization, that it amounted to theft of intellectual property. Stone Ridge froze payments on Sara's contract immediately, standard procedure when a dispute claim is filed. Sara heard about it from Gray on Friday morning. "I understand," she said. "What do I need?" "Either show that the notebook doesn't belong to Calhoun, or show that your recipes are independent." Sara closed the phone, sat for a minute.
opened her notebook and started thinking. She had kitchen incubator receipts with dates, orchard care records, 8 trees at Ben's rooted from her cuttings, the lease with Ben, a wait list of 28 customers, going back to January, 3 months before any of this, and Aunt Clara, who had seen the notebook on the 28th of May, fresh from the trash can. She also had this. She'd never copied Dorothy's recipes exactly. She'd adapted them for different equipment, different temperature, different timing. Every iteration was in her notebook. Her recipe was her recipe. On Monday, she called the legal clinic at the university in Murfreesboro, explained the situation. They connected her with a supervising instructor, a young woman named Anna Gomez, who handled small business cases. "Bring everything you have," Anna said. "Wednesday. All the receipts, all the notes, the contract, and the notebook." Wednesday, Anna spread the papers on the table and went through them methodically. Then she asked one question. "When did you last work at the Calhoun estate?" "February 8th. I resigned." "That's before the dispute." "Yes, 2 months before." "And access to the trees?" "None since then. My trees are at Oldridge's nursery." Anna closed the folder. "Sara, your position is strong. The notebook is a gray area, but your recipe is not. It's recorded in your notebook, dated, with iterations. That's your working document, not Dorothy Calhoun's. On the notebook itself, if Calhoun discarded it, that's abandonment of ownership. You have a witness. It's not bulletproof, but it's substantial." A pause. More importantly, Stone Ridge builds its positioning on story. Your story is the story of a woman who saved what the owner threw away. That story is stronger than, "We have an old orchard." Do you see that? Sara looked at her. "Yes," she said. "I'll have a response submission to Stone Ridge ready by Friday. You'll sign and send. After that, their decision." Gray called the following Monday morning. His voice was calm, but slightly different than usual. "Sara, Stone Ridge's legal team reviewed the materials. Their attorney concluded that the Calhoun claim has no basis in regard to your recipes. The freeze is lifted." A pause. "There's something else. The head of purchasing at Stone Ridge reached out directly. She'd like to meet you." "Why?" "They liked the story." Gray's voice warmed slightly. The story of a housekeeper who rescued recipes from a trash can and a year later is supplying a rare apple vinegar to Nashville restaurants. They want to shoot a short video for their social media. The meeting was held the first Wednesday of May, exactly 1 year after Sara had found the notebook in the trash can. Rachel Ford, Stone Ridge's director of purchasing, 40-ish, business suit, was drinking tea in Ben's nursery kitchen. They'd held the meeting there because the young hauling trees were already in the ground and showing the first spring green. Rachel looked out at them through the window. "How old are they?" "1 year. 1 more season and they'll give their first apples." "And the ones from the old orchard?" "I don't have access there anymore," Sara said simply. "I know." Rachel shifted her cup. "Vivian Calhoun approached us directly. We declined." A pause. "Sara, we want to double the contract volumes, vinegar and jam, starting in the fall. Is that feasible?" Sara calculated. 16 trees, young, first harvest next season, the frozen reserve, plus the arrangement she'd made with Hicks Farm in the next county for apples of a close variety as a bridge. "Feasible," Sara said. "Good." Rachel stood and offered her hand. one more thing. We'd like the packaging to read, Recipe by Sara Colvert, revived from the lost records of the Calhoun family. Are you comfortable with that? Sara thought for a second. Yes, she said. Vivian Calhoun saw it on Stone Ridge's Instagram the same day they posted a short video about Sara and the small orchard behind Ben's nursery. 4,000 shares in a week. Vivian sent Stone Ridge an angry letter. Stone Ridge replied with a standard legal response, stating that all claims regarding Sara Colvert's contract had been found to be without merit. In Beresford, of course, everyone found out. Small town. Linda Page came to the next market and said to Sara, "I didn't know it would go this way." Sara said, "It's all right, Linda." She wasn't angry at Linda. Linda was just part of how small towns work. At Ben Oldridge's nursery, a small sign now hung above the entrance. Heritage Variety Nursery, home of the Holling. Ben had made it himself from walnut. Beatrice Lown put a clipping from the county paper on the library bulletin board. The article was titled, "The Story of a Forgotten Apple." Beside it, a photocopy of a page from Dorothy Calhoun's notebook. Beatrice had made that copy back in autumn, when Sara first showed it to her. "Just in case, I always copy important things. Librarian's habit." By fall, Sara had 2 helpers at the market, a young couple from a neighboring town who took a cut of sales. Clara handled incoming orders by phone. She did it for free, and did it so well that Sara often thought Clara was a born operations manager. First full year of revenue, $63,000. Not a fortune, but it was her business, her trees, her recipes. And next year, the young orchard would give its first real fruit. Dorothy Calhoun's notebook stands on Sara's shelf now. Linen cover, brass clasp. Sometimes she opens it and rereads the margin notes. Fading ink, the handwriting of an older woman who loved what she grew. Holling grows nowhere else, except at Ben Oldridge's nursery in Beresford, Tennessee. 16 trees, and every year, more. Sometimes, other people's hands throw away what they can't see. And when that happens, what matters is that there's someone nearby who can. Did you ever find something of value where everyone else saw nothing? Tell us in the comments, and tell us what you did with it.